Welcome to One Decision. Former Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, we're so happy to have you here. I just want to ask, the big thing everyone is talking about, obviously, right now is these incursions from assumed Russian drones, Russian flight spaces. The thing in Denmark was particularly surprising. Do you think NATO has reacted sufficiently to these actions by Russia?
Oh, you are so cautious. You say assumed Russian drones. It's not assumed Russian drones, it's just Russian-made drones or Iranian-made drones. Yeah. So there is no doubt that Russia deliberately attacked NATO airspace. This is for the first time, I believe, since not the Cold War, since the Second World War. But at least definitely for the first time since the founding act of the Washington Treaty. Yeah. I am not a military expert, and I never comment on the stuff I don't really understand. But I was told by a number of folks and pundits who really are good in this military expertise that Russians, in this particular case, made an incursion with one aim, is to double-check, not just to double-check, but to figure out what kind of military protocol NATO member states really have. What kind of reactions NATO...
Do you think that's the point, is they're testing defenses, or do you think they're testing the alliance?
And as a politician, I can elaborate on this. The key message that designated war criminal Putin tries to send to every single nation is that, look, I will send drones. I am ready to send tanks. I am ready to wage the war against you unless you abandon Ukraine. That's the way I read it. The second issue is that he wants to test either Article 4 or Article 5. Actually, he is testing the NATO resilience. And he is testing the NATO unity. Because initially, my beloved President Trump, he was very clear saying that it could be by mistake. But then President Trump has changed his tone. And he said that the NATO has to shoot down either it's a missile or drone on the Russian fighter jet.
Did that surprise you to hear that from President Trump?
So it is within their Article 5 obligation, and this is the very reason why you guys established NATO 76 years ago, to defend your homeland, and the U.S. have to be committed to this kind of obligation. It's not an MOU, and this is a legally binding obligation to defend in case of any kind of incursion or invasion of one member state, and so. So the second issue is to test both NATO and the third issue is to test every single NATO member state. What is the reaction, for example, of the Polish government, and not only Polish government, but of Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and that's the reason why we discovered new drones in another areas of EU's airspace.
But don't you think there may be another aspect to this? When things are not going exactly as Russia planned, they're very, very good at opening up different issues, different fronts, partly sort of to distract from their own problems. And I've certainly spoken to people who say perhaps this is also, I mean, I'm not arguing with your points, but I'm adding an additional one, a sign of Russian uncertainty and Russian weakness, in that they're actually, trying to sort of distract from what is actually beginning to happen in Ukraine. Would you agree with that, or don't you think that's possible?
It is a piece of the puzzle, and I share your take. Okay, Russia is pursuing a number of aims, and the very thing that you just mentioned is a part of this big game. And there is another part of this game. They want to distract, not just to distract, they want you to redeploy resources from Ukraine to your NATO member states, okay? And they want to invoke a kind of fear among the NATO member states. Look what's happening, for example, in the US. They are scarce on the missiles, and you are well aware that Pentagon is right now trying to ramp up the production of the missiles, starting with the Patriot missiles and then with THAAD missiles. So the idea that Russians have is to sow the chaos everywhere.
Yep.
And they are quite good at this.
They're good at that. They're chess players.
But do you think NATO has responded sufficiently? I mean, one of the things you just mentioned is one of the problems is as this is happening, different countries are handling it different ways. They're saying they're going to react different ways. You know, Poland now says they're going to shoot them down whether they're overpopulated areas or not. Germany has this thing where they only have permission to shoot them down if they're over military bases, otherwise their police have to do it, so they have to fix the legislation. Have these NATO countries, in your mind, reacted sufficiently and reacted in a uniform way? Do you think they will get there, or do you think this is potentially a problem?
Well, that's another wake-up call for the NATO member states. You weren't ready to this. Let me put it bluntly. But this very incursion actually drives a comprehensive and joint effort of every member state, of every NATO member state, just to craft new protocols and to be more interoperable and to gain from the Ukrainian experience. And we are ready, and my president already was very clear saying that, look, we are ready to share this experience. Cheaper, better, and faster, how to shut down Russian drones or Iranian drones.
But has Trump's recent statement about Ukraine regaining all of its territory changed anything on the ground in Ukraine, either politically or militarily? I mean, it seems to me there has been, over the past month or 6 weeks, a significant shift in where the US administration is now on the issue of Ukraine. And I talk to people that reflect this shift, this change, and I think I do detect that there's a different view in Washington.
Your experience is just unbelievable. And I believe that you can easily gauge and really see what's happening in the White House in D.C. In my humble opinion, well, on the one hand, we can listen to the U-turn. I would prefer to watch to the U-turn. So,
You're waiting for the policy to follow it up.
here is the thing. The words matters only in one case. If they are supported by strong actions. So I really welcome this kind of verbal U-turn. And this is the verbal gymnastics. But we are living in a completely different world of geopolitical gym. And I stick more to powerlifting rather than gymnastics.
I was a ballet dancer, so I can't do either of them.
You're lucky.
My hips and knees are not. I also want to ask you about NATO membership, because when we traveled with Secretary Blinken towards the end of Biden's term, we were at the G7 in Italy, and every member there said it wasn't a matter of if, it was when Ukraine would join NATO. That's something we haven't really heard from the president yet, despite him seeming to turn course a little bit. Does that still concern you? And to what you were just speaking about, what concrete policy steps would make you feel like he was backing up, the president was backing up this nominal sea change about his opinion about Ukraine?
Let me tell you a story.
Okay. We're a podcast, we love stories.
Okay. So, in 2008, as the Speaker of the House, of Ukrainian House, I welcomed then President of the United States, George Bush, in Kiev. And that very year, as a Speaker of the House, I co-sponsored the letter to the NATO member states with then President and Prime Minister, asking NATO to provide a membership action plan for Ukraine.
Right.
And everyone...
And this is like an official, these are steps you need to take. Yes.
It's like an entrance to NATO.
Exactly.
Okay. It was 17 years ago, and we largely expected that NATO, as the super vehicle, how to defend freedoms and liberties and sovereignties all over the world, will be engaged in supporting Ukraine to defend its sovereignty in future. And you know that we failed. But let me put it this way. It's not we, I mean Ukrainians, who failed. The West didn't pass the test. At that particular juncture of history, Germany and France actually blocked this bid. And what happened next? Putin was green-lighted with an invasion into Georgia, with an illegal annexation of Crimea, with sending its troops to Donetsk and Lugansk. Just to tell your viewers, the war that has been waged by Putin, it didn't started in 2022. It started in 2014. And Putin didn't manage to take over Ukraine in more than 11 years. So, to put it in a nutshell, I believe that the best way to stop this war was to make Ukraine a NATO member state urgently. The next day the war started. But there was no guts. There was no political will on the side of my beloved Western friends. And that's what Putin understands, really. He doesn't care about any kind of statements, summits, and coalitions of the willing. What he cares about the real steps and actions that have to be undertaken.
So what's... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's taken an awful long time for, let's say, the political awareness of Europe to grasp what's actually been happening with Russia. And, I mean, I think now you do see a sea change. But there is, there is still a problem with some nations over the issue of NATO membership, despite the fact that Ukraine now has the largest, most battle-hardened army in Europe, and any future security issue in Europe, Ukraine will sit at the core of that because of what's happened and because of what it now represents. So I don't think this issue yet is fully resolved. I mean, what I mean by that is the path is not yet clear to NATO membership. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the incumbent U.S. administration was very clear, saying that there is no membership perspective for Ukraine in the nearest future. But the U.S. is a vibrant democracy.
What about Germany?
So we're going to have the next White House and the next House. So and let me remind to everyone that we have a legally binding obligation of the NATO member states passed in Bucharest in 2008, when the NATO member states promised NATO membership perspective for Ukraine. And this was reaffirmed both in Washington and during the last summit. So actually we are committed to get this membership, not just prospective, but the full-fledged membership. You're absolutely right saying that there is a sea change. And for example, even in France and Germany. I do remember France and Germany a decade ago, with all this, sorry to say, crap of Bolshoi theater, Russian history, Russian culture. You know, Russian history and Russian culture, we know Russian culture. The war crimes and atrocities that were committed by Russians in Ukraine, in Mariupol, in Bucha, and everywhere. This is the Russian culture. An abduction of kids, this is the Russian culture. War of aggression, this is the Russian culture. And I see these kind of dramatic changes, positive changes, on the side of the Western powers. But look, the price is very high. And it's Ukrainians who are paying this price with our human lives. Because Putin was very clear in 2007 in Munich, saying that the biggest disaster of the past century is the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Okay? And the West, and look at the first row in during this Munich Security Conference. They were sitting, the heads of states and governments of practically an entire NATO. They were deaf. They were thinking that he's kidding. He wasn't.
So one of the keys to this change, I mean, how do you view the situation now in Germany? I mean, Merz has really shifted German policy, but I mean, Scholz declared, as it were, the rearmament of Germany, never did a damn thing because he was politically trapped. But now with Merz, they've changed the debt rules for the German government. And surely, I mean, I think that for Ukraine, Germany's role, obviously, historically, is absolutely key to rebuilding not just European defense capability, but also supporting Ukraine's reconstruction. And I'm talking not only defense, I'm talking in the longer term, regenerating the Ukrainian economy.
Look, I commend the German government, and actually both German and French and the UK. We are very grateful to the United Kingdom. You guys are doing an unbelievable job in both in supporting Ukraine and getting
we've
along.
We've at least been consistent in the UK. We started off at the front and have stayed at the front.
And getting along with the US administration. Look, I wish Chancellor Merz is to deliver on his promise, which is to provide Ukraine with the Taurus missiles. But on the other hand, they are doing really a lot, and the contribution of Germany is very, very high and valuable.
Because they started off very, very slowly. I mean, at the beginning.
Sorry?
They started off very slowly at the beginning.
Well, but at least they are in process of Zeitenwende. They are in this process of Zeitenwende. And it was, it wasn't an easy job for Germans to make this face about. Or about face, how you call it?
About face.
About face.
Close
Anyway,
enough.
You turn.
We understood.
Got the point. Not a problem.
But they did it. They did it. Because they do understand that Russia posed this threat to their national security. On the flip side, they have this AfD, which is far radical and pro-Russian actually force. And I believe that Russia is playing with this force directly or indirectly. And this force is not just anti-Ukrainian or anti-European. In my humble opinion, this force is anti-German because they are fighting against the national security of Germany, actually supporting both Russian narratives and supporting Russia's war against Ukraine.
There was some suggestion that the AfD had shifted their position on Russia, but you don't think that's happened?
Well, maybe there are some suggestions, but let's look at the broader picture, where they stand.
But it's worrying when you see what level they're at in the German polls. I mean, they're above 20%, I think.
Around 25%. But on the other hand, another 75% is on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, before we run out of time, in 2014, you helped kind of break up Russia's gas monopoly. And as you look at the actions that America and EU have either taken or not taken, do you think sanctions are sufficient? Do you think Putin cares about sanctions? Do you think they matter to the Russian economy? Are they having any kind of effect?
A decade ago, nobody believed that the Ukrainian government is capable of actually winning off the dependence on the Russian both gas and nuclear fuel.
Oh, that's right.
I did both. So we, as of now, we are out of hook, of the Russian hook, of Russian Gazprom and Rosatom. This is Russian state-owned nuclear whatever company. And it's a perfect example for Europeans. And Europeans did a lot because they decreased the Russian gas dependence by 80%. It's a staggering number.
Yeah.
But you are still within 20% with this LNG and the rest of the stuff. So whether it's doable, yes, no doubt. And I believe that Americans have an interest in this, both national security interest and economic interest. Because the Russian gas is and could be substituted with the US-made LNG.
So what more would you like to see? Do you think secondary sanctions are realistic?
Look, in terms of sanctions,
Yeah.
whether this is a magic wand or a silver bullet, no. Because look at Iran, look at North Korea, look at Cuba. So the miracle didn't happen. And they are still alive.
Yeah, I have a very dim view of sanctions. I've covered them for years, and they, from a reporting standpoint, I'm never convinced they work, but I'm happy to be argued with.
At least, look, North Korea is under sanctions since 1949, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember, okay? And Iran, 1974, something like that. And in the end, both of them managed. North Korea is a nuke state, and Iran has the capabilities to produce and to launch short and medium range missiles. So whether this is a silver bullet, no. But it has severely limited Russia's ability to attract investments, to get cutting-edge technologies, and actually even to sell carbs on a free float. If you look at the Russian budget and if you look at the Russian economy, it is in a dire state. It is. High inflation, and look, Russian economy is no longer a real economy. It's a big military factory. So Putin put Russian economy on the military footing. And if you look, for example, into the civil sectors of so-called Russian economy, they are nosediving. So Russian economy is completely maintained by the military production. If you look at the numbers that Russian budget gets out of the carbs, the revenues are flat in the last 5 years. It is around 130 billion US dollars. Let me remind you that Putin spends around $120 billion for the war against Ukraine. So these numbers are practically similar. The same goes with an overall volume of the sales of oil and gas. It's more than $300 billion per year. So we were not able really to curb and to limit the flow of cash that is financing its war chest. So we have just to be frank and open and just to realize that as of now, the sanction policy is not as effective as one expected. But please do not jump on this Russian narrative that they are not scared of sanctions. They are.
You think it matters?
Absolutely. It definitely matters.
But the analysts that I speak to, military analysts, say that around now, maybe in the latter part of this year, we're at Russian peak military performance. I mean, in terms of production and resources, but that Russia is facing a distinct military decline in its capability.
Yeah, look at the export. It declined by 90% of the Russian military ammo.
Yeah, so I mean, in effect, the war could be at a turning point, but the key issue, is Western support for Ukraine as we reach this turning point, that it should increase so that Ukraine can exploit the likely advantage that might well occur in the latter part of this year.
Do you think that Zelenskyy offering your expertise, which I think you are inarguably the best at the world at taking down these drones in effective and cost-effective ways, this offer he made to other European nations to come train Poland, to go to Estonia, to teach them, do you think that helps maintain support for Ukraine? It's transactional, but we're in an era where transactional politics seem very popular, especially in the US. Do you think being able to offer those kinds of expertise helps you keep Europe on side longer, helps you get more support from Europe, or do you think it's just all part of European security?
It helps to provide security to your member states.
But what does that do for Ukraine?
Look, it is about your life, your security, and your countries, and your population, whether they feel secure or insecure. And Ukraine really has an amazing expertise and experience and record. So, and we are ready and we are able to share. Answering your question, look, if, for example, in Poland or even in the US, and ordinary people realize that Ukrainians are doing their best to provide security for their own, how it plays with the politicians and how it plays with an overall perception of Ukraine? Positively. Because this is a two-way street. Yeah. So it's beneficial for both of us. And this is the message I am trying to deliver all over the world. And the last time I had a joint panel with Special Envoy Kellogg, I said, look, this is the best ever investment you had in the history of the United States.
He's actually very pro-Ukrainian.
He's very,
yeah,
absolutely. There is no need to preach to the choir, talking to, right. He's on the right side of the history. But the message was to the Americans that, look, you've spent just $60 billion in military aid, and we as Ukrainian managed to degrade Russian land forces by 50%. So you've got an unprecedented intelligence. We've compromised Russian military. You've got an unprecedented experience how to fend off Russians, how to fight against Russian ammo, and whether Russians are really capable of fighting for the peanuts. And we paid the highest price with the human lives. So, and the reason I am telling you this, because it's crystal clear for me that it's in the national security interest of the United States to help Ukraine. If Americans want really to be strong, if they really want to make America great again, because I was thinking always that America is always great. But maybe great again is more important, okay?
Before I let you go, we're running out of time, but you were in the government. You know what it's like to lead this country. I'm wondering, I was actually there for Zelensky's election. I was an election monitor when he ran against Poroshenko. And obviously, you haven't been able to have an election since then. With so much going on and with focus on fighting, how is Ukraine doing domestically? How is the government doing? How are people feeling about their government? How are people feeling about Zelensky? How are give us a sense of what it's like.
Well,
we hear so much about how you relate to the rest of the world. I want to know how people inside Ukraine are feeling.
I can give you the numbers.
I'll take them. Don't offer a journalist numbers. I'll take all of them.
In the preparation to my voyage, advocacy voyage all over the world, I asked one of the most prominent Ukrainian pollsters, this is Razumkov Center, to conduct polls, just to figure out what is the general mood of the Ukrainian population. So I will start with Zelensky. I am not a fan of Zelensky, okay? But we have to rally around the flag because he is the commander-in-chief, okay? And even despite the fact that we have different views on a number of issues, I support the Institute of the Presidency, okay? And commander-in-chief in times of war. And we have around 60% of Ukrainians who still support the president. This is an unimaginable number for the majority of politicians all over the world. Okay?
Oh yeah, that would be a huge approval rating in the US. That would be unheard of, yes.
So 60%. And could you imagine that under the latest poll, 74% of Ukrainians believe in an unconditional victory of Ukraine over the Russia.
Even still.
74%.
That's amazing.
Yes, there is some kind of decline. It's not a steep one.
Yeah.
But
that's still a very significant number.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm telling you this is the general mood. We are tired. We are exhausted. But we are not broken.
And one last point. Are you on top of the corruption issue? I mean, not you personally, but Ukraine as a nation.
My government established the most effective network of all anti-corruption bodies. National Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, National Anti-Corruption Bureau, Preventive Agency, Special Anti-Corruption Court, and we passed tons of legislation. So we have this independent body. Do we still have corruption in Ukraine? Yes, we do.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, look at the corruption that existed a decade ago and now. Could you imagine, we have the Chief Justice of Ukraine sitting behind the bars. It's unimaginable. We have Deputy Prime Minister right now under the investigation. So, but there are a number of flaws that have to be fixed. And this is it has to be on the agenda both of the political authorities and anti-corruption agencies.
Great. Good note to end on.
70% still think that they should fight for every inch of territory.
74.
74, forgive me.
Big deal.
That's a statistics that's gonna sit with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
We
very
really
much for
appreciate
joining
it.
us.
My
Great.
pleasure.
Great.
Thank you.